his computer. Isaac,
Rabbi, good morning. It's so great to see you.
good morning. Wow. So we are doing an exciting read of our fourth healing story, our fourth and last. Obviously, Jesus will continue to heal the rest of his life, but
Hmm.
these four narratives are really stuck almost, I won't say at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, but the beginning of his like miracle bringing ministry. I think we don't really see so much, and it's before this of his miracle giving. But we really saw more the speaker, the professional, charismatic leader, speaking over the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount. And it's really interesting that these four stories really set the foundation and mark about what Jesus' ministry is. And in Matthew, I would say less important, but important. Really, lawgiver and supreme moral giver is probably more of a Matthew take. And having these four stories is itself a consequence of that. So, we'll get started and we'll try to see what's unique about this story.
Well, I feel like we're on to something big today. Anyway, so on
Yeah,
on that note,
that might just be demons and
uh,
impacting you.
The Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 8, verse 16 onwards. When evening came, many who were demon possessed were brought to him, and he drove out the spirits with the word, and healed all the sick. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. He he took He took up our infirmities and bore our diseases.
Okay, this is like a go-to Jesus move. If I say to you, Isaac, a good Christian, tell me, what is it that Jesus does? What kind of magic, what kind of miracles does he do? This is on the list, right? This is something that is well known, right? Is this something that you thought about growing up? That Jesus strikes out and casts out demons and evil spirits and stuff like that?
You believe it or not, yes, right? So when I mean yes of this, and I grew up in South India where there's a strong belief in the supernatural as in this outer realm and that impact the physical world. Have I seen manifestations of this? Yes. Were they all true? I don't know. Some of it could just be people just making up stuff, right? Um, but now with some insight, with some educational training, it's hard to understand. Like if I took this with a beginner's mind as a kid, well, yeah, he's God, can do all this. But once you look at this verse by verse, it does raise a ton of questions. What does it mean by demon possessed? Like, what does it mean? And then that he drove out the spirit with the word, but it doesn't say what type of word. But it does raise a whole conundrum of questions as in, can this be explainable? What does it mean? Is it possible? Are there parallels to this? And how does this all fit within his broader narrative? And
So I
that's my
feel that you're leading to my next question. Isaac, do you believe in demons?
that's a
Like
great.
I could say, it's so interesting because I could say definitively there's no such thing as a demon. That would be my opinion. And if you say, well, what about demons? I go, okay, let's talk about what that means. Let's talk about the historical, the cultural, the religious, the philosophical context of these questions. And we'll do that today. But I would say my disbelief is not representative of the ubiquitous framework of religion. And I would say religions are not 50-50. Like certain time periods, everyone agrees there's demons. Certain time periods, everyone agrees there's not demons. And we kind of live in this postmodern aftermath where we see that some people definitely believe it. We see that there has to be something. So I'll put myself online and say, I don't believe in demons. But what do you about you, Isaac?
So I would say that the Bible does speak of some of the devil, of Satan, what do you want to call it, right? And so wouldn't that be a demon, right? In the sense that the evil one? So when I think of demon, I don't necessarily mean different. Again, it's hard, at least when I think of this, it's some manifestation of the evil one that is God, and then there is the evil one. And so
So
at
what
least
does the evil one mean for you? Is the evil one just a fallen angel,
uh,
as we would
that's a-
say in
I
classic thought?
I don't know. There's lots of mystery behind this. I don't even know how. So it raises, and I've thought about this quite a bit. If there is God and this is all powerful, like as the Bible claims to be omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, how did evil come to exist in the first place? How did this entity of evil come to exist in the first place? So to answer your question, I don't know. I
Okay.
think there are multiple theories behind it, but I know there's an evil one in terms of this is fallen angel, how it came to being, who is this? I don't know. I would love to hear
So
what you have. I would
that's
love to
great.
hear
So
what
we're not going
you
to go through the whole history. What we'll do today is we'll go through one verse from the Bible. There's a ton of verses. We'll do one verse, and then we'll go through one Talmudic story about the king of demons, which is not called Satan, but he's called the king of demons. And then we'll try to get a better understanding of what it means to have demon possession in Matthew, but keeping in mind that there's going to be many more stories. So first thing we do is we're going to look at Deuteronomy, because this is actually one of the most, it's at the end of the Bible, at the end of the Pentateuch. There's a very clear verse in 32:17 Deuteronomy. I'll read in English. So they sacrifice to Shadim. Shadim is the Hebrew word for demons. They sacrifice to demons. This is a part, like a poetic line, just so you know. So it's not like it'll be hard to like even interpret easily, but they sacrifice to demons, no gods, aka that they were not gods, who they're sacrificing to. Gods they had never known. So they were sacrificing to things that were not gods, that were demons that they had not known. Los New ones who came about lately, new gods who are popping out every day. These people were sacrificing to, who stirred not your forebears' fears. And then it goes, you neglected the rock, God who begot you, forgot the God who labored to bring you forth. Okay, so in 32:17, the first thing is we see very clearly that not only do later texts talk about demons, but in this poetic line, it mentions demons. So the question is, what do we do with this line? One option, it says, you worship demons and they weren't gods, God never knew them, and so you're worshiping nothing, and you're worshiping a fakeness. And all the rationalist school will always take it to read that way, that whenever we mention demons, you need to psychoanalyze the person who needs the exorcism. You got to have a conversation and try to figure out what's happening, but it's not a spiritual medical force. The more mystical, or the more people leaning towards a magical mythical relationship to religion will say very clearly, no, God doesn't want you to sacrifice to demons, because demons are real, and you're not, the only thing is you're supposed to worship God, and God created demons. Maybe they're fallen angels, maybe there's some process that God wanted them or didn't want those demons, but they exist. And when God says don't worship demons, it's not because it doesn't work. 100%. If you worship a demon, there's a benefit that you could get out of it, but it's forbidden. Bad idea, but it totally works. So that's going to be like the two main reads of this verse, and that's how it's going to play out in medieval times with rationalists like Maimonides and Sajagaon will say, obviously, there's no such thing as demons. Sometimes maybe it's referring to gravitational pulls or physics, that, if your shoes are getting worn down, maybe that's just how physics works. And if you see someone speaking in crazy tongues, you got to try to understand where they got that tongue from. And the others, let's say already in more modern times, the Vilna Gaon, and in earlier times, Ramban will say 100% only the philosophers think that demons don't exist. Everyone else thinks demons exist. When you read the Bible, you get the impression demons exist. When you read Nachmanides, a almost contemporary of Maimonides, but a little bit later, he implies that, listen, you're just not allowed to do it. But God, like you say that all these thousands of historical texts, including the New Testament, including the stories in the Talmud, including the stories in the Bible, and you mentioned, for example, Satan, who's mentioned in Job. So all these references, you're just going to say metaphor, allegory, simile. You're going to have to say, like, you'll be so apologetic that you may have no religion left. So that's the second side. So we're going to set up as a foundation saying, I fall into the rational school. You fall into, like, I hear both sides, let's work it out. That's what you kind of said, like, but I think your perspective is very much in line with the apologist religious school, saying, like, how could you say that there's nothing to it? There's too much holy text that revolves around this issue to me just say that I think it's all wish-wash.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's our first. Next, one of the longest stories in the Talmud. I'm not gonna read you the whole story. The story would take me 15 minutes to read, but I'll read you it in an abridged version. And I'm reading this to you because A, I think you'll find it interesting, and B, it is a not contemporary Jesus, but a little bit later story that would have been floating around already at the time of Jesus. So that's why I thought it'd be interesting to read to you. I'll read you a much, much shortened version to not waste your time. So the story takes place in the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud in Gideon, page 68a, and it actually is so long it goes to page B. Here's the story. King Solomon, our famous King Solomon, he was charged by his father and by arguably, the religion of the time to build the first temple. So the Talmud points out that according to the Torah, according to the Pentateuch, you're not allowed to use iron tools in building the temple. For various reasons. There's a verse in Exodus specifically about the altar, but you can't use iron tools. So now, Isaac, I tell you, build a temple without using iron tools. What do you do? So Solomon, like you and me, wouldn't know how to build without using some tools. So he consulted the sages of his day, and they advised him that he must locate the thing called a shamir. It's a like I would call it a magical worm, but it's a worm that had some acid inside of it, and it would dissolve stones. So when I was growing up, I was told wrongly that the Beit Hamikdash, the second one, was built by having these worms crawl on stones, and then the acid would dissolve the stone, and then you could break the stones apart without tools. And that way, no metal weapon would ever come across the altar of God. So so he's told to get this shamir, this magical worm. But the question is, I've never seen this magical worm. Isaac has never seen this. Where do you get it? So in order to locate the shamir, King Solomon, he was told he needed to capture the demon king Ashmedai. And again, one thing I always ask you about, what did you hear about when you were a youth? Every Jewish kid knows Ashmedai, king of the demons. And I'll be honest, he doesn't show up so often. This is I can't even think of another story aside from this one, but king of the demons. And you noted, probably for you, king of the demons would be Satan or one of the Nephilim who fell from heaven. And there's different options. But it's interesting. We have Ashmedai. The king sent out to Benayahu, which is one of the lieutenants mentioned in 1 Kings, and he was armed with a magic ring. We have all this could be a Aladdin story. It's amazing. How does the magic ring work? Ashmai spent his days studying Torah, and it's difficult to capture him. He's a very wheelie dealy sneaky person. So Benayahu employed a trick. He tricked Ashmai into drinking wine instead of water that was normally that he would normally drink, and he had subdued the demon once he drank wine. So wine was his downfall. So he got amazing technical story elements here. But Netanyahu returned to Ashman. He brought Ashmedai back to King Solomon, and Solomon got the ring, built the temple. But the story doesn't stop there. This is where the part I think you find most interesting. So Solomon continued to keep Ashmedai imprisoned. He didn't let him go free once he got the Shamir worm. And one day Ashmedai tricked Solomon into taking off his magic ring, whereupon Solomon lost his power over the Demon King. The Demon King took control, and Ashmedai cast Solomon off his throne. He assumed power and ruled the nation of Israel from the throne in Jerusalem in place of Solomon. It is the belief of most Jewish children that when King Solomon ruled over Israel and Judah, or the United Kingdom, it was not Solomon the whole time. So Ashmedai ruled, and Solomon was forced to become a beggar, a wandering beggar. And eventually
Wait,
Solomon, yeah.
this is a story, right? This is not real.
I'll tell you a second. Eventually, Solomon returned to Jerusalem and warned the sages about the counterfeit to test his identity and see if he's really Solomon. The sages questioned his wives, who told him that the king often demanded forbidden sex and that he always kept his legs clothed. The sages thus confirmed that Ashmedai was an impostor by knowing from the wives, and the story finishes by an argument between third century sages about how Solomon ruled. So, did this story really happen? This story obviously is based on the fact that we have certain verses in Malachim and Kings that point out how did he build it? How and more importantly, what I'd say is that according to rabbinic tradition, King Solomon wrote 3 books. One of them is viewed as very, very holy, but we see that one of them is Ecclesiastes. And when you read that one, it kind of feels like it was written by a not holy, not religious person. And therefore, I view this story as kind of explaining how a hero of Jewish, not only mythology, but reality can be viewed, could have gone so much up, down, left, right, off the beaten path. So, yeah, so this is obviously, it has certain elements of mythology, but I'll tell you, like usual, when this story is told to kids, they believe it wholeheartedly because it's in the Talmud, and a lot of Jewish A lot of the Jewish people don't differentiate between the rabbis as storytellers and the rabbis as legalists. They just say if the rabbi said something, it's true, and they don't see the homily side of the rabbi. Anyways, I'm telling this story because a version of the story would have been floating around at the time of Jesus.
Is it like Santa Claus? Is it like believing in Santa Claus?
So I think the answer to that is based on our original foundation question about the nature of demons in this world. So for me, any mention of demon as being a metaphysical force would be Santa Claus. But
Interesting.
other people, again, like I feel Santa Claus is a little more difficult because I think Santa Claus is something that no one really believes in. But I think a better equivalent for Christianity would be, let's say, like either how holy relics inside of churches have magical powers. You have the bone of Saint John in a church, and how holy and powerful is that? So I would view a bone as a bone. But obviously, especially within the Catholic tradition, there's definitely the idea of articles imbued with power and the holy relics. Anyone who watched Monty Python would know, even you have the holy hand grenade that's mentioned in their Bible. So the idea of holy relics and holy items that would have supernatural powers is obviously not foreign to either Judaism. And let's be honest, when you read the Bible and you see Moses raise his hands or a staff that parts water, obviously, when you get a more like Islamic kind of read of these things, it's just like always God does this and everything is an accident. But if you will be open more to the magical or mythical perspective, could Moses split the sea without the staff? So I feel like I would say, of course, the staff, but other people are like, well, it's clear that the staff has certain power. The staff turns into a snake. The staff is able to turn back. The staff is able to eat other snakes. The staff is able to turn water red. So again, like at a certain point, you say, wow, this is a pretty powerful staff. Because if it's not the staff, then how come Moses isn't just like doing it with his words or with his powers? Okay.
Yeah, and I think this also follows in the New Testament where Peter and Paul like keep walking, people to be handkerchief, that they would have this shadow cast on them. It's that belief where that those folks are imbued, these people are imbued with power, the things that they hold or they have, and that power or that healing or whatever you want to call it can come through them. But I can see both sides. Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I feel like even if I feel so complete or so strong in my beliefs, it doesn't mean that anyone else is. And I told you, even Jewish tradition, there's still uh, that belief. And I'll even tell you a quick story.
I find this very interesting because it sounded like you're saying that any belief in the metaphysical belief in satanic power, you find it to be Santa Claus, as in, you know,
Yeah, yeah, I do. But I'll tell you, like when I studied for a year in Israel after I graduated high school in 1998 and 1999. And when I was there, I was living in Mea Sharim, which is one of the fundamentalist communities right outside of the old city of Jerusalem. And it's a community that's of Haredim, where people dress and have a certain outlook that is very conservative and very fundamentalist. So while I was there was a story that passed around of a tape of a woman who was clearly possessed. And she was speaking a language I think that she didn't know. And everyone passed around this tape and they heard some rabbi do an exorcism and everyone believed in it. And it was amazing. And I remember thinking, wow, these guys are idiots. But like I'll tell you that I think, alone. And when you think, and I'd say the majority of Orthodox Jews today who will be more attuned and less rationalist to be in our society. And therefore, I think the majority of Jews, definitely, I would say more than 90% of the people in Israel who heard this tape believed it. And more importantly, my yeshiva, my school had, let's say, 30 rabbis. They all believed it.
hmm.
So the people who are meant to be my mentors and the people who are meant to like lay down the law about what the belief systems of Jews are, they all believed it. So if anything, my heretical beliefs are what lead to me to not believe. But again, like I'm rooted, my tradition will be more rooted in the rational school of Maimonides, and I mentioned Sajagon and others who reject it. Okay, so but I think that story is very telling that it wasn't unclear for them. It wasn't ambiguous. They all believed it because there's no problem with a demon possessing a person in the 21st century. Well,
Hmm.
technically that was the 20th century. Still had 1 year left, but okay. So let's turn to the New Testament. So we have like I feel like a good Jewish background saying that we conclude that most Jews would have like Josephus said that Josephus would have been contemporary, and Josephus 100% would have believed in demon possession. Okay, so when we look at the New Testament, there's certain things that stick out for us. So the first thing that evening they brought, so evening, it's very common trope that demons are more prevalent at evening. I think that that's why evening is brought here. When you look at the parallel, this might be a Sabbath occurrence, and that's why evening is here. So we don't know if it's the Markian version or but evening is a lot more the time of demons is evening. So they brought to him many who were possessed with demons. So I love over here now we're going into like being our fourth narrative where people are bringing him stuff. They're like, oh, this guy has it going on, and now people are bringing him to heal. So when we say possessed with demons, I think it's clear in possessed with demon evil spirits. Unfortunately, they're probably used a little bit interchangeably in the New Testament, and I don't think we should be so meticulous in analyzing when it says demon or evil spirit. But that's something we could do another study on another time. But it's clear that people believe that they had demons, and and that Jesus has the ability to get rid of them. So I guess my question for you is: we already talked about how a lot of the miracles that Jesus has been doing, or a lot of the healing that Jesus has been doing, has been with the ability to disbelieve still. So when I see him heal someone, it's not we never see him grow someone's arm back.
Hmm.
So I feel this would fall into that category of possessed with demons and now he's not, there's no way to really reality test that. The person was having, let's say, a real demon or an epileptic seizure or whatever it was, and now it's gone. So my question for you over here is that why is this chosen as an important thing that Jesus does? So I hear healing the sick. Is this
Yeah.
just another example of healing sick people? And these are, and therefore the demons don't matter. These people are sick and they're healed. Another example. Or is there something special that this is the fourth story and then demon possession and evil spirits and casting them out is maybe the highest level of exorcism or healing?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I also look at this as not so much as a progression, but as in different kind. The first one was the law, as in he said, God, if you can make me clean. As in Matthew was portraying Jesus as being outside of the law or having more dominion over the law. With Peter's wife, he was able to hear physical, with just saying a word, he was also able to heal. We had the case of the centurion where he could say a word. So this I look as it's a different realm. As in the first one had to do with the law of purification. Second one had to heal, but I don't know, I'm trying to make things up. Second and third had to do with physical healing. But this is more the topic of demon possession. It's in a different realm. I said it's not a physical realm. And so was the author trying to portray that Jesus had he had authority uh, over all these realms, over the law, over physical body, the physical healing, and this other world, which to your
So
point,
I
right?
would agree with that, Isaac. I think
Your
there's no
point,
doubt.
we cannot prove this, right? So we do not know what it's like, what does it mean that what does it mean that they were what does it mean that they were healed of that they were let go of this demon possessed? We cannot prove it. And so
Well,
these
listen, I don't think it's our job to prove it. It's our job just to hear it and to try to understand it. So I take it for granted. Jesus, there's a guy who is possessed and now he's not possessed, unpossessed. So I think that's fine. And there's different ways that Jesus does this, that as you noted, that he casts him off a word. And was it Mark 5:8? He says, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." And that guy was like rehabilitated from his affliction at that point. So I think our two choices, going back to our original foundation, is that either this is a psychological disorder or an epileptic biological disorder, or the person really has this. So I want to put aside what the person was, what his symptoms were. The symptoms were something. The symptoms were shaking or yelling or speaking or acting crazy. Fine. The other healings of like where Peter's mom is sick, lying in bed, she had a fever, so her forehead would have been hot, and now it's not hot. So over here, I want to take note of what Jesus is really accomplishing. And this is what I think is the most important thing. The other healings, you mentioned that there's progression or there's some value. What is the value here that's being accomplished? What is accomplished when you heal a person of demon possession? Is it like what is the like the person Isaac, you have a demon and I unpossess it, I dispossess it, I get rid of that demon from you. I guess you say now you're normal now. You say thank you, and I guess maybe you'll start believing in me more, I guess, and join my cohort, my coteries. So why is this even mentioned? Like, why is this an important thing? So I have a theory, and you can tell me what you think. I want to put aside the magical side or the non-magical side. I don't care. What I want to note is that if someone is possessed by a demon or an unclean spirit, they are not themselves. By definition, an evil spirit is taken over them and they're almost being controlled remotely by someone. Just like with Ashmedai, when he took on Solomon's form, he was able to kind of like take on his place in the world. So these people are not themselves. So the reason I think that this story is the fourth one and the one mentioned is because I think this is actually the most important message. The message is the people who believe in Jesus, the people who are touched by his word, are the people who now can now be themselves. A person who can now be himself is the person who lives in this world and now can join the kingdom of heaven.
That's
So
a very that's a really delightful perspective, Rabbi. Yeah, okay.
right, so it's not about the demon possession that's mattered. It's that Jesus is actually remaking reality into the way it's meant to be. It's not meant to be that angels or demons are able to enter people's bodies and then people can't be themselves. By definition, evil spirit and demon possession means that you are not being controlled by God and or yourself. The kingdom of heaven means that you make decisions that you're going to be controlled by God. So the evil spirit disallows you from being controlled by God, and it disallows you from making your decision to be controlled by God. So what Jesus is really doing is all he's doing is the word pressing the reset button on the person and saying, you're free to think and act in a way to join the kingdom in heaven. And this is what I think is the greatest healing. It's not about not having a fever. It's not about rejoining the community. It's not about him even healing anything. It's about having a situation where a person could come and allow you to be your authentic, true self. And
So,
that, yeah.
Rabbi, on that note, right? So when you say to be authentic to self, you also mentioned to be controlled by God.
Well,
What do you?
I use both next to each other. So
Yeah.
it's
So
like a slave. A person who's a slave is told what to do, but he doesn't ever have to listen. He can always choose, kill me. You're never, even when you're enslaved, you're not, your mind is not enslaved. You're listening to yourself to listen to the master. So I think that's how I imagine the kingdom of heaven for Jesus. You listen to yourself, and yourself tells you the best life is to follow the will of God. So there's still like you're still your own master because at the end of the day, you still are making that decision, but you're outsourcing that decision about what you're going to do to someone else, but you're making the decision to outsource it. So that's how I view it here as well. So there's always those two pieces next to each other.
yeah. So do you see this as just a cognitive healing or something deeper than that? Because
Oh,
this,
so I don't. I think like I want to not answer that. So I feel that it's very easy to say that demonic possession is mental illness, right? And there's endless articles about how physical and spiritual suffering is the agency of demons. So if someone has a mental illness, that would be called demon possession. But I don't want. Who cares? Whatever reason, if it's a real demon, what happens if you have a mental illness? You, in short, the biochemical makeup of your body disallows you from living the life that you choose.
Mhm.
And therefore, you're bound, you're enslaved to certain biochemical forces. And therefore, there's no difference if it's a real demon or a biochemical force. The only way that you could free yourself from this is to eliminate those biochemical forces. So it doesn't matter to me what Jesus did. What the outcome is what I think is important. And this is the ultimate healing. A healed person is not someone who's free of sickness. A healed person is someone who's free to act as they choose.
now, okay, can I? So is that really ultimate freedom to act as how they want them to choose? So are you saying that the author is putting this to be the highest form of freedom where to to
Well,
act and
I mean,
choose?
I don't mean to frame this from the perspective of freedom. I'm just saying I'm framing this. The ultimate healed person is a person who like when Jesus is, enters Peter's house and his mother-in-law is lying in bed. How come she's lying in bed? Because she's so sick that she can't get out of bed. That's the point. She's constricted. So is she lacking freedom? Like, I don't know if freedom is the right way, but she's definitely constricted. She's constrained. She can't go and act. Her physical body doesn't act in the way that her mind is telling her to. And that illness is disallowing her from moving. And it's interesting. The response of the removal of the fever is not that she only gets up, but she gets up and begins to serve Jesus. So that is the proper response. So I'm saying this is exactly the same thing. These people now, they have the equivalent of being constrained to bed with their mental illness or being possessed by demons. And what he did is he cured them of their mental issues or the demons, and he went and he cured all who were sick. So sick people are limited in a way that disallows you from really being part of the kingdom of heaven. It's interesting. Like, why can't they say, with your sickness, come to the kingdom of heaven? Why does it have to cure anyone? It almost feels like I always think like what's the point of curing? The point of curing is not inherently, yes, it shows Jesus as a magic worker, great, but the cure allows you to be a person who could serve them. It allows you to be that. And that again, right away, and cured all who were sick. And we'll skip the one verse, but the verse after that, Matthew 8:18. Now, when Jesus saw great crowds around him, he gave orders to go around the other side. Like he had great crowds around him, because all the more he does this, it's like it allows more people to join his crew, but it also allows the people who join his crew to be an authentic part of his crew.
That's a wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. That is something to think on, to reflect on, where he does free a person to be their own self, and then make be in a place where they can make free decisions on their own.
And that is the point of healing, because otherwise it's interesting. I feel that in modern culture, a lot of times you'll see like the handicapped community, or you'll see people who have mental illness are, if anything, taken more care of by Christians, because Christians almost see like the downtrodden and the
Hmm.
lowly. And I actually heard a preacher talking about the Israel-Palestinian conflict, and he mentioned like inherently you have to take the Palestinian side, because it doesn't matter who's right or wrong. Jesus takes the side
Of them.
of, yeah. So when I heard that, I like, there's a truth and an untruth to it, right? It's cherry picking the text, but I definitely understand where he's coming from. That a lot of times Christians will take better care of the handicapped. I mean, we hear horrors, absolute horrors from the Muslim and community today, or from the Greek community, about the handicap. And if anything, I've always noticed that there's not much notice of mentally challenged people in rabbinic texts. And I can't say if this is true or not, but like, you're feeding 5, 10 people. Like a lot of times they're not viewed as the same level of humanity in certain cultures. And I feel
Hmm.
Christian culture today tries to view, from my perspective, a lot of Christian culture views it. I think they worry more about the handicapped community. And I'll even mention my uncle, who's passed away since, was mentally challenged, and he lived sometimes at my house, sometimes at his own house, but sometimes in a home. And annoying to us, he actually was proselytized all the time. They used to have Christians trying to buy his soul all the time. And eventually my mother was forced she actually set up a completely Jewish home for him. And there's lots of factors that led to it. But one is that Christians cared so much about his soul that is annoying to his Jewish family. So I feel like that attitude is a product of, well, we can't cure them anymore. We can't carry out the miracles of Jesus, but we can still care for them as Jesus did. And it's interesting because you can hear both ways. On the one hand, if Christians said, well, we can't heal them, Jesus would heal them. Let's not care. But really, I think the high level of care is really to try to be Jesus-like and to cure them and to heal them. If not cure their body, at least cure their soul. Okay.
Wonderful. Rabbi, on that note,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank
Um,
you.
okay. Speak to you one second.